Hi everyone, I'm Nancy Guppy, and this week's episode of Art Zone is a special presentation of An Evening with Edgar Allan Poe. This one-man show, featuring actor Bradford Farwell in the title role, tells the true story of Edgar Allan Poe's ambitious idea to launch a literary magazine called The Stylus that would exclusively feature the work of American writers. In 1849, a St. Louis publishing house told Poe that if he could persuade 1,000 people to subscribe to the Stylus at 40 cents a month for 1 year, they would publish the magazine. With that incentive, Poe traveled to cities and towns pitching the idea of his literary dream to anyone who would listen. And that is what you are about to see. Edgar Allan Poe offering his literary opinions and performing his poems and stories in the hopes that he will convince his audience to subscribe to the Stylus. So, please enjoy An Evening with Edgar Allan Poe.
Allow me for a moment to praise your fine city. The general attitude here, in fact, in the entire region, seems to be superior to that of the Northeast. Oh, so too, the literary talent is more vivid, less conventional, less conservative. And while one may think that my words are mere flattery, consider this unhappy fact. I must soon leave this noble splendor you call home. My dear, no, your smile belies your innermost thoughts. You doubt my sincerity. No. Do you think that I miss the dirty streets of Philadelphia? No. Do I long for the foul stench of Boston, where even the most robust individual may find his health in an increasingly precarious state? No. Give me Seattle, where a good romp in the woods is not so far. Seattle. No doubt this city affords an excellent place to think and write, which will explain the high proportion of free-spirited intellectuals I see in our little salon. I thank you for letting me mingle amongst your fine people, people of talent. Let us drink tea and share our poems and our witticisms. Now, you, sir, may I ask a question of you, sir? In the year 1813, Britain's population stood at 30 million. Now, the question: how many new books, new works, do you suppose Britain produced in 1 year? No. Actually, the answer is 1,000, not 500. But anyway, the question. Now, America's population that very same year stood at a mere 6 million. And while Britain produced 1,000 new works, my good sir, please speculate. How many new books do you suppose America produced the very same year? 1,300. That's the very number I would have guessed myself. But in fact, the answer is 20. 20. My friends, even today I stand before you ashamed at this proud nation's intellectual dependence on Britain. Now, I have here a modern magazine produced in New York just last year. And as I peruse its pages, what do I find? Ooh, pious British verse. Mawkish British fiction. Ooh, syrupy British music to be played in the parlor. Contemptible fashion plates of women stiffly dressed in the latest European frippery. My friends, may I suggest taking American literature away from unimaginative men of wealth? May I propose a new magazine? One which must and will aim high. A magazine for the intellect. A 40-cent monthly where the greatest American writers will be celebrated, the worst exposed. A magazine that will raise the popular taste to as yet unheard of heights. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the most innovative magazine in the history of American literature. I give you The Stylus. Now, naturally, such lofty ambitions will require a steady, sure-handed attention to financing. In fact, a publisher in St. Louis stands ready to begin when 1,000 subscriptions have been procured in advance, which they will be, I assure you. Alas, I forget my manners. Please forgive my headlong leap into an unabashed, yet worthy agenda of soliciting subscriptions. And let me read to you from the prototype of what will be the first stylus, a poem of my youth. Alone. From childhood's hour I have not been as others were. I have not seen as others saw. I could not bring my passion from a common spring. From that same source I have not taken my sorrow. I could not awake my heart to joy at the same tone. In all I loved alone. A sigh. Did I hear the slightest trace of a sigh from you, my dear? No matter. You understand. Let me confess to one who knows, one who feels. Adversity and I have been no strangers. In fact, my life has been a veritable avalanche of misfortune, starting with the death of my mother, adoption, disinheritance, and then the sad story of my dear wife. But of all my trials, the heaviest of my burden has been the want of parental affection. All I loved alone. The Boston Post rated the volume of poetry a parcel of current trash. The London critic likened my manner to Tennyson or Coleridge, concluding that my work echoes the ideas wafted to it from England, and with the feebleness of echoes. The feebleness of echoes. Further pearls of literary critique spew forth from one James Russell Lowell, who said of my poetry, and here I quote, "Some of the best of its kind, although the heart seems all but squeezed out by the mind." Mr. Lowell's doggerel further implies that I possess keen intellectual power, but no heart, no principle. I mean, even to entertain such ideas. My entire career rests upon principle, superior moral sense, the exposure of fraudulence and imbecility. Mr. Lowell, like so many of the overrated ninnies of his New England literary clique, is little more than a parasite. an unsightly leech with a Harvard degree. The man has no guiding principle except a oafish insensitivity. To think that such a vacuous booby can be the arbiter of American literary standards, it just chills my bones. Well, that's excellent Seattle tea. Lest I digress, my first story begins with a model from Longfellow, who, despite his association with the contemptible Lowell, and dare I add Emerson and the other incorrigibly arrogant boobies we find up in New England, Longfellow must occasionally be praised for his delicacy of expression. And so, the motto of the telltale heart: art is long and time is fleeting, and our hearts, though stout and brave, still like muffled drums are beating funeral marches to the grave. True, nervous, very nervous had I been, and am. But how then am I mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not dulled them, not destroyed them. Above all was a sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to tell how the idea first entered my mind, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object there was none, passion there was none. I loved the old man. He never wronged me, he never gave me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes. He had the eye of a vulture, pale blue eye with this film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold. And so, by degrees, very gradually, I decided to take the life of the old man and rid myself of the eye forever. Now, this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing. You should have seen me. You should have seen how calmly I proceeded. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And then every night at midnight, I'd open the latch of his door and I pushed it slowly. Oh, so slowly. And then, when I had made an opening sufficiently for my head, I first put in a dark lantern, closed, all closed, so that no light shone out. And then I thrust in my head. You'd have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved it slowly, very slowly, so as not to disturb the old man as he lay upon the bed. And when my head was well within the room, I undid the lantern, cautiously, very cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it just so far that a single dim ray fell upon the vulture eye. Now, I did this every night for 7 long nights, just at midnight, but I found that the eye was always closed, so it was impossible to do the work. Well, it was not the old man that vexed me, but his evil eye. And then every morning when the day broke, I bounded into his chamber, heartily calling him by name and inquiring how he passed the night. So, you see, he would have been a very profound man indeed if he suspected that every night, just at midnight, I looked in on him while he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my powers, of my sagacity. To think that there I was, night after night, opening the door, and the old man not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I chuckled at the idea, and perhaps the old man heard me, for he moved suddenly in the bed. Now, you may think that I drew back, but no. The room was black as pitch with the thick darkness. The shutters were closed for fear of robbers, so I knew the old man could not see the opening of the door. I kept pushing it open, steadily. Now, I had gotten my head in, and I was about to open the tin fastening of the lantern when my thumb slipped, and the old man shot up in bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still, and I said nothing. For an hour, I did not move a muscle. Meantime, I did not hear the old man lie down. He was still lying awake in bed, listening, just as I had done. Night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the walls. Presently, I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was a groan of mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or grief. Oh no, it was that low, dull sound that arises from a bottom of the soul that's overcharged with awe. I knew that sound well. Many a night, just at midnight when all the world slept, it had welled up from the bottom of my bosom, deepening with its dreadful echoes the terrors that distracted me. Though I say I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt, and I pitied him, although I chuckled at heart. I knew that he had been lying awake in bed ever since the first slight noise. He had been trying to fancy them causeless. He was saying to himself, it was only the wind in the chimney. It was only a mouse crossing the floor. It is merely a cricket that made one single chirp. Yes, he had been trying to comfort himself, but found all in vain. All in vain. For death, in approaching the old man, had stalked with his black shadow before him. And now the shadow had approached and enveloped the victim, and it was the mournful presence of the shadow, though he could neither see nor hear me, that caused him to feel the presence of my head within the room. After I had waited a long time, very patiently, I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lantern, and so I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, until a single dim ray, like the thread of a spider, shot from out the crevice of the lantern, and it fell full upon the vulture eye. It was open wide. It was wide open. And I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it in perfect distinctiveness. It was all the dull blue with this hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow of my bones. Meantime, I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray as if by instinct precisely on that damned spot. And now there came to my ear a low, dull, quick sound, much such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well. It was the beating of the old man's heart. His It only increased my fury, as the beating of a drum, stimulates a soldier into courage. But even yet I refrained, and I kept still. I held the lantern motionless, steadily maintaining the ray upon the eye. Meantime, the hellish beat of the heart grew quicker, louder and louder every moment. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say, louder every instant. Do you mark me well? Amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise of this, it excited me to uncontrollable wrath. Yet for some minutes longer I refrained, and I kept still. But the beating grew louder, louder, louder. I felt sure the heart must burst. And now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. I threw open the door and I leapt into the room. He shrieked once. Only once. I pulled him to the floor and I grabbed the heavy bed over the top of him, and then I sat upon it, gaily, smiling. Well, to have the deed so far done. The heart beat on for several moments longer with a muffled sound. At length it ceased. Well, the old man was dead. I removed the bed and I examined the corpse, and I put my hand over his heart and I held it there for several minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His evil eye will trouble me no more. Now, if you still think me mad, you will so no longer when I unveil the precautions I took in concealment of the body. Now, the night waned. I worked hastily, but in silence. I first dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head and the arm and the legs. And then I removed 3 boards from the flooring of the chamber, and I deposited all within the scantlings. I then replaced the board so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could detect the difference. There was nothing to clean up. No stain of any kind, no blood spot whatsoever. I'd been too wary for that. A tub had collected all. Now, when I had made an end to these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. As the clock struck the hour, there came a knocking at the door. I went down to answer it with a light heart. For what had I now to fear? There entered 3 men who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicions of foul play had been aroused. Information was lodged at the police office. And they, the deputies, were ordered to search the house. I smiled. For what had I now to fear? Please do come in. The shriek? Oh, it was my own during a dream. The old man is absent from the country. Please come, search about the house. Search well. You see his treasures? Undisturbed? Secure? Satisfied? Please do come, sit down, while I, in the perfect audacity of my own triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot which reposed the old man's corpse. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered cheerily, they talked of familiar things. But ere long, I felt myself growing pale, and I wished them gone. My head ached. I fancied a ringing in my ears. Still they sat, and still they chatted. The ringing, it became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it gained in definitiveness until I realized that the noise was not within my ears. Well, no doubt I grew very pale. I talked more vehemently with a heightened voice. But the noise, it steadily increased. I mean, what could I do? It was this low, dull, quick sound, much such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, yet the officers heard it not. I talked more freely, more quickly, but the noise steadily increased. I mean, I arose and I argued about trifles in a high key with violent gesticulations, but the noise steadily increased. I mean, why would they not be gone? I mean, I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, as if excited to fury by the observation of the men, but the noise steadily increased. I mean, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore, I swung the chair upon which I sat, and I grated it upon the floorboards, but the noise arose above all and steadily increased. It grew louder, 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 louder. Mighty God, was it possible that they heard it not? Oh no, they heard, they suspected, they knew, they were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think. But anything was more tolerable than this derision. I felt I must scream or die, and then hark again, louder, 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 louder. Villains, I cried. Dissemble no more, I admit the deed. Tear up the floorboards, there, it is the beating of his hideous heart. It is my sincere hope that my audience will understand that not all of the author's works are strictly autobiographical. True. I am the solitary figure of alone. And every work that I have or will recite springs forth from the innermost part of my very soul. Every poem or work, with the exception of the telltale heart. Oh, my dear. I detect disappointment in your lovely eyes. May I ask your name, your full name? Annabelle Mayer. Annabelle Mayer. Would you care for a blueberry scone? Annabelle Mayer. Annabelle Mayer. 2 words. 5 beautiful syllables. Tones only made to be uttered by angels singing in the moonlit dew have stirred from out the abysses of my heart thought-like thoughts, which are the souls of thoughts, richer, far wilder, far diviner visions than ever a man could hope to utter. My spells are broken. The pen falls powerless from my shivering hand. With thy dear name as text, I cannot write. I cannot speak or think. Alas, I could not feel. For 'tis not feeling, the standing alone on the golden threshold of the wide open gate of dreams, and staring adown the gorgeous vista, and thrilling as I see Annabelle Mayer. Here, please, take this. No, it is a mere token of the admiration I hold for you. Oh, Annabelle. Your eyes do tell a tale, an epic of emotion, including, I fear, doubts of my sincerity. Doubts that I am a slave to you in all things, that whatever you bid me do, I'll do. Oh, no, but you impose upon me the torture of silence, of terrible suspense. You do not love me. Or answering my prayers, you cry out, "Oh, Edgar, I do." No, alas, a love that hesitates is not a love for me. Perhaps at the very least, you will pledge a subscription to the stylus. No. Of course, I jest. No. Please, take this mock edition for being so pleasant and patient. And if you peruse the pages, you will no doubt find a valentine written to me by my own Virginia, my sissy. And upon further inspection, you will no doubt see that the initial letters of each line spell out my name. And so, her acrostic valentine to me. Ever with thee I wish to roam, darling, my life is thine. Give me a cottage for my home, and a rich old cypress vine. Free from the world with its sin and care, and the tattling of many tongues, love alone shall guide us there. Love shall heal my weakened lungs. And oh, the tranquil hours we'll spend, never wishing that others may see. Perfect ease we'll enjoy, without wishing to lend ourselves to the world and its glee. Ever blissful and peaceful we'll be. 6 years ago, a wife whom I loved as no one ever loved before, she ruptured a blood vessel while singing. Her life was despaired of, and I went through all the agonies of her death. But the torture was repeated over and over. She recovered partially, and I again hoped. And at the end of another year, the vessel broke again, and I went through precisely the same scene. And again, at the end of another year, and again, and even yet, once again. With each new cycle, I experienced a loss, and all the while, I more urgently desired her to live. I went insane with long intervals of terrible sanity. My critics crucified me for drinking myself to madness, but it was actually, I was crazed by Virginia's struggles, the never oscillating pain between hope and despair, which I could no longer endure without the complete loss of reason. I had, indeed, lost all hope of permanent cure when I found one in the death of my wife. My next poem has not yet been published. I offer it here, untested for your approval. Its title is Annabel Lee. It was many a year ago, in a kingdom by the sea, that a maiden there lived that you may know by the name of Annabel Lee. And this maiden, she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. I was a child, and she was a child in this kingdom by the sea, and we loved with a love that was more than love. I and my Annabel Lee. With a love that the winged serfs of heaven coveted her and me. And that was the reason why, long ago in this kingdom by the sea, a wind blew out of a cloud, chilling my beautiful Annabel Lee, so that our high-born kinsman came and bore her away from me and shut her up in a sepulchre in this kingdom by the sea. The angels, not half so happy in heaven, went envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason, as all men know, in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of a cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. But our love was stronger by far of those that were older than we, of many far wiser than we. And neither the angels in heaven above or the demons down under the sea could ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And the stars never rise, but I see the bright eyes of my beautiful Annabel Lee. And so all the night tide, I lie down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in her sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea. Though Mr. Lowell will fail to find the heart of this poem, I trust you can see it for yourself. This is a superb blend. But you must forgive the medicinal additive, the unceasing threat of losing my Virginia brought on this overmastering anxiety, for which my physician prescribed this chalky substance, calomel, not to be confused with the more pleasing tasting calomel, or for that matter, any addictive substance. Of course, I jest. My sole drink is water and tea, of course. You will forgive me for following the physician's king's orders. Now, more characters. Shall we have another story? Stories of mystery, science, and fantasy. Oh. Yes, here's one. Malanta Tauta. Now, set in the year 2848, it is about mile-high balloons carrying 400 passengers at 150 miles an hour, trolleying between two institutes of worship known simply as finance and fashion. Yes. Not that one. How about, Maisel's chess player. Now, this is a story about a machine that can beat anyone at a game of chess. But, no. This is mere child's play for the keen intellects I see before me. My friends, I have written a treatise that will in time transform human thought, as well as the worlds of physical and metaphysical science alike. It will unveil the meaning of being and nothingness, unveiling nothing more than life itself. Now, I say this calmly, but I say it. What I offer is true, it is immortal, and if you have just 3.5 or 4 hours, I will recite it for you. Its name is Eureka, and 3.5 hours. Just 3.5 hours. I could do the Raven, if you would prefer. Yes, very well. The Raven. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious... Pardon me. Excuse me. The Raven. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as if someone gently rapping at my chamber door. 'Tis some visitor, I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this, and nothing more. Ah, distinctly I remember it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow. Vainly I tried to borrow from my book surcease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore, for that rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here forevermore. Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. Sir, said I, or madam, surely your forgiveness I implore, for the fact is I was napping, when so gently you came tapping, and so faintly you came rapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there, and nothing more. Deep into that darkness peering, long stood I there, wondering, doubting, fearing, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the darkness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word Lenore. This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word Lenore. Merely this, and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning. Soon again I heard a tapping, something louder than before. Surely, said I, there is something at my chamber lattice. Let me see then what Thratis in this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind, nothing more. Open here I flung the shutter, when, with many a flirt and flutter, in there stepped a stately raven from the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not an instant stopped or stayed he, but with mien of lord or lady perched above my chamber door, perched and sat, and nothing more. Then this ebony bird beguiling all my sad soul into smiling by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it bore. Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, quoth I, art sure no craven, ghastly grim and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Much I marveled this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevancy bore. For we cannot help agreeing that no sublunary being was ever blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door, bird or beast on the sculptured bust above his chamber door, with such a name as Nevermore. Wondering at this silence broken by reply so aptly spoken, surely, said I, what it utters is its only stock and store. But the ebony bird beguiling still my sad soul into smiling. Straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. There I betook to linking fancy unto fancy, thinking what this ominous bird of yore, what this grim, ungainly, gaunt, and ghastly bird of yore meant in croaking nevermore. This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burnt into my bosom's core. On the velvet violet lining that the lamplight gloated o'er, but whose velvet violet lining that the lamplight gloated o'er, she shall pass. Ah, nevermore. Then methought the air grew denser, perfumed by some unknown censer, swung by angels whose faint footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath lent thee, by these angels he hath sent thee. Respite, respite, and nepenthe thy memories of Lenore. Let me quaff this kind nepenthe and forget the lost Lenore, quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still if bird or devil, by the heaven that bends above us, by the God we both adore, tell this soul with burden laden, if within this distant Aden he shall clasp a sainted maiden whom the angels name Lenore, the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word a sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked upstarting, get thee back into the tempest, in the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as token of that lie thy soul hath spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust above my door. Take thy beak from out my heart. Take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas above my chamber door. And his eyes have all the seeming of a demon that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor. And my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore. Now, critics proclaim The Raven to be a beautiful poem, wild and shivery, written in a stanza as yet unheard of by gods, men, or booksellers. The Raven has been picked apart and analyzed to the point of exhaustion. The bird is Poe himself, pecking his way into the reader's heart, evermore reminding us that those that we have loved and lost shall never return. That however painful it is to remember them, it is still more painful to give them up. That she shall never be forgotten. You know, the poem is a mere trifle. A poem for people who don't like poetry, fatefully destined to be beloved. You know, I always thought it possible to contrive a poem for both the critical and popular taste. And at that, I have succeeded. Alas, I have succeeded all too well. I am tempted to rename the poem My Golden Handcuffs. Not that the poem is without merit. It is rather a stylistic exercise, which may indeed be appreciated most by connoisseurs of fine literature. Now, this next poem was inspired by recent events off the Golden Coast of California. That is, of course, the mad dash of some 40,000 people, many of whom mind nothing more than financial ruin and a fatal case of cholera. Anyone? No. Here I must amend my speech. The poem is inspired by the poet's journey, the inglorious quest for the light of truth. And here I use a technique that I borrowed from The Raven, and that is condensing the meaning of a journey down to the changing significance of a single word, nevermore. But in the case of this poem, El Dorado, the word is shadow. and you will hear it prominently set at the turning point of each stanza. Now, the first shadow is rather literal, the second is gloom, the third is a spirit, and the word's deepest meaning comes in the final stanza. Now, I challenge you to determine the meaning of the final shadow. El Dorado. Gaily bedight, a gallant knight in sunshine and in shadow, travels along singing a song in search of El Dorado. But he grew old, this knight so bold, and o'er his heart a shadow fell as he found no spot of ground that looked like El Dorado. And as his strength failed him at length, he met a pilgrim shadow. Shadow, said he, where can it be, this land of El Dorado? Over the mountains of the moon, through the valley of the shadow. Ride, boldly ride, the shade replied, if you seek for El Dorado. The boundaries that divide life from death are both shadowy and vague. Perhaps El Dorado lies through the valley of the shadow of death. That particular journey, like a good book, is one you must undertake yourself. As we all shall, of course, in good time. And one more thought about the poem, the poet's journey. And here I have some concerns. Do I present the poet's life as lonely misery, hardened into the marble stillness of despair? It's true. Sometimes I think the struggles are more than I can bear. I'm utterly worn out and exhausted. If not for some pure, tender, womanly love to save me, I'll never make it another year alone. Are you yet ready to pledge a subscription to the stylus? Annabelle? No? Okay. Lamentations aside, literature is the most noble of professions. In fact, it is the only profession fit for a man. And for my own part, whatever shadows one may encounter, there is no seducing me from this path. In fact, I am about to bestir myself in letters far more busily than I have for these 3 or 4 years past. I am in better health than I have ever known myself to be, full of energy and bent on success. Now, but I will admit that the last several years for working for others has been at times unendurable. Editing for various literary grovelers, forced to model my thoughts at the behest of men whose imbecility is apparent to everyone, except themselves. To coin one's brain at the nod of another is, to me, the hardest task in the world. My friends, I feel that our American literary life is ruled by dunderheads, governed by an aristocracy of dollars. Quite literally, an author's success is solely due to their wealth or social status. And yet, to me, poetry is not a purpose, but a passion. And like all passions should be held in reverence, poetry should have nothing to do with the paltry commendations of mankind. And yet, my enemies resent and oppose me because I have chosen to remain poor, only so that as a critic, my independence is preserved. I am free to be unscrupulously honest in expressing my outrage. And with that, I would be remiss if I did not completely expose the great mogul of the imitators. And I am talking about the imitations and plagiarisms of Pope, Shakespeare, Coleridge, and others. Now, this individual is not only a servile imitator, but a most insolent literary thief. Now, I refer to, of course, to Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, who could not have possibly won his position without the adventitious position of professor of modern languages and Bell's letters at Harvard. He is nothing more than the dexterous adopter of the ideas of other writers. And now, yes, I will recognize his limited imagination, as I also recognize him to be singularly deficient in all of those important faculties which require that which render artistic talent. In fact, one need only to place Longfellow's Midnight Mass of the Dying Year next to Tennyson's Death of the Old Year to see Longfellow for what he is, a barefaced and barbarous plagiarist. Now, Midnight Mass, in my estimation, is the most inestimable piece of balderdash with which the good sense of the American populace has been so openly and villainously insulted. Longfellow is a hog in letters, a mere swill-swallowing pilferer. Now, okay, if I can speak frankly, for I have an inveterate habit of speaking the truth, I cannot do otherwise. Comparing Longfellow to Tennyson is no comparison at all. Longfellow compares to Tennyson as a bubble compares to the ocean on which it floats. And a further point, it is time to stop coddling American writers simply because they are American. So far from lamenting that the daily puerilities are of home manufacture, do we adhere pertinaciously to our originally blindly conceived idea that we find ourselves in the gross paradox of liking a stupid book the better because, sure enough, its stupidity is American. I am looking for subscribers to a better magazine, one more vigorous, more original, more pungent, individual, and independent. The stylist will adhere to only the purest forms of art. It will hire only the best writers and ignore mere commercialization. Now, I ask not a penny today, but only a pledge to pay with the first issue, due for publication and circulation January 1st of next year. Now, how is this all possible? Surely you're not overstocked with wealth. I mean, what poor devil of an artist is, but I have been guaranteed the money to start this magazine, and I will succeed. I mean, the only impossibility about the matter is the impossibility of not succeeding. My last brief poem was written and published several months ago. And before I recite it for you and leave your gracious company, I would ask you to close your eyes and imagine a world without literature. No. Without poetry, without painting, without theater, without sculpture. This new world is an opportunity to find the next great writers that will embolden generations to come to be better to see deeper, to feel more. Now open your eyes and imagine that you're sitting next to Shakespeare, to the next Elizabeth Barrett Browning, to the next Tennyson. A dream within a dream. Take this kiss upon thy brow, and in parting from you now, let me this much avow. You are not wrong to deem that my days have been a dream. But if hope has flown away in a night or in a day, in a vision or in none, is it therefore the less gone? All that we see or seem is but a dream within a dream. I stand amid the roar of a turf-tormented shore, and I hold in my hands grains of golden sand. How few. And yet how they creep through my fingers into the deep. God, can I not save one from the pitiless wave? Is all that we see or seem but a dream within a dream? All my days have been a dream. I thank you for your gracious company. Please consider subscribing to the Stylus. And we will meet again